All right, 801. Next video for the next assignment. Today in class, we talked about slope. It was our first formal introduction to what slope is, what slope looks like, and how do we find slope looking at a graph. Okay, and so we started off class by just talking about how steep lines are, not about how long lines are, because that kind of threw some people off, but which line is steeper. And I don't know if you can tell here, kind of hard to see the line, but we talked about comparing line A to the line B, and seeing which one was steeper. If it was a hill and you were walking up, which would be a harder incline, which one would be steeper walking up. And so majority of people in class said that B is the steeper line, but that was just kind of based off of our eyeballs. That was just based off of us not really guessing, but it wasn't a very precise measurement. So then we talked about, well, how can we know for certain if something is steeper than the other? And we talked about how slope is a measure of how steep a line is. So if we can find the slope, then we'll know for sure which graph is steeper than the other graph. It should be noted that today we only talked about lines that have a positive slope. So lines that when we're going from left to right are going up. If you think about if you drew a little stick person on this line and they were walking on it, they are walking up a hill versus walking down a hill or on a slide. Eventually we're going to talk about things that have negative slope, but for today we were just working on positive slope. Okay, so how to find slope given a graph. So we've got this graph A, and I'm going to zoom in here so I can see my 2 points. Okay, and I just need to find 2 points on this line. Now they're given to you. Eventually, they're not going to be given to you, and you need to be able to find them on a graph. And so we want to pick something that has a very clear X and Y value. This is kind of like on the crossroads of 2 lines here, right? I'm not picking a point on my line that's just randomly in the middle here that has no clear X or Y value. All right, so this one, we started talking about describing the path from one point to the other. I have a point here and I have a point here. My path is going to take me up and over. Okay, so from this point to get to this point to this point, I need to go up a certain amount and then over a certain amount. There was a little bit of confusion on how you're supposed to count here. I say to count the spaces, but in order to do that, I am going up 2, because it's 2 lines there if I count there. So we went up 2, and then over 1, 2, 3, over 3. So up 2 and then over 3. And we talked about making that direction a ratio, right? If I take those directions that we went up 2 and over 3, and I turned it into a ratio is a fraction, up 2 and over 3, 2 over 3. This number is representing my slope. Now this number does not simplify to anything. 2/3 does not simplify to any other fraction, so I can just leave it as is. I don't have to turn this into a decimal. You can just leave it as 2/3. So we would say that our slope for this graph is 2/3. Okay, now that we have the slope of graph A, let's see if we can find the slope of graph B. I'm going to move that off to the side. Okay, graph B, to find the slope of this, again, I'm tracing the path from one point to another on this line, and they've kind of outlined which 2 points I'm supposed to use. I'm just going to make these a little bigger here, from this point to this point, and remember we are going up and over. Okay, so then how far up did I have to go? 1, 2, 3, 4. I went up 4, and then I went over. I'm not counting this first line. See, if I start here, I go 1. I don't start on 1 and go to 2. So 1, 2, 3, I went over 3. So up 4 and over 3. And again, after I've counted my path, I create a ratio. I create a fraction with that. I went up 4 and over 3, a fraction of 4/3. Now 4/3 is a fraction that is actually greater than 1, or some people might call it an improper fraction. So we could turn that and turn it into a mixed number. 4/3 is really 1 and 1/3, or you could leave it as 4/3, up to you. Okay, but that is the slope of this graph. Our graph is 4/3. So all of this is together. Now that I have the 2 slopes for my graphs, I can compare them. graph A has a slope of 2/3. Graph B has a slope of 4/3. Right? Which slope is bigger? The slope that is bigger is the ratio that's bigger, right? That's going to be the line that is steeper. And in this case, 4/3 is greater than 2/3. So we would say that graph B has a steeper slope. It has a greater slope, so it's a steeper line. Okay, do one more example here of drawing the path. It has given me the 2 points that I'm using from my path. And drawing the path tends to be pretty straightforward. It's the counting of the path that kind of throws people off. How far up? 1, 2, 3, 4. To go up 4, and then over how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That was an awful drawing, but still okay. Up 4 over 5. And when you're turning that into a ratio in the fraction, if the 4 is up, you're putting that as our numerator, the number on top. 4 up and up. And I just think of like being on top there. And since it's over 5, 4 over 4 is over 5. Little brain shortcut there for you. So our slope for this graph would be 4/5. So I'm going to group all this together. Move that to the side. And then I have graph B here. Graph B, it is kind of hard to see this line. I don't know if you can see it. It's really thin there. And we have our 2 points from this point all the way over to this one. Okay, and that is up 1. And then over, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Over 12. So when I want to write this as a ratio, it was up 1 over 12. I'm writing it as 1 over 12. Right? And when you're writing it as a ratio, you want the distance traveled up needs to be our numerator here. So up 1 over 12. So then, oops. When I'm thinking about, no, these two need to be together. When I'm thinking about which of these 2 lines has a steeper line, it's kind of a little obvious just looking at it. About if I think about like 2 hills, which hill is going to be harder to walk up? Probably going to be graph A there because it looks like it's at a steeper incline than graph B here. But I have these fractions to know for certain. And 4/5 is greater than 1/12, right? And so since this is the greater fraction, this has the greater slope. This is the steeper line. So hopefully that helps you with getting slope from a graph. While we're in this unit, we're going to learn a bunch of other ways to find slope. But if you're given the graph, this is one way to kind of do that. If you have 2 clear points that you can count from, that's kind of how it is introduced. Hope this helped. Let me know if anything didn't make sense. If you need extra practice, extra help, feel free to reach out.